Okay, so in this video here, we're going to be talking about how to do polynomial synthetic division. Now, before you do synthetic division, you have to know how to do polynomial long division. I have a video on that, so make sure you check out that video. Synthetic division is actually easier, but you have to know how to do polynomial long division because synthetic division does not work all of the time, okay? Whereas polynomial long division will always work, okay? So you have to be proficient in both methods. That being said, synthetic division is easier. So if you can use it, you definitely want to use it. All right. So let's get right into the video and just a quick little diagram here so we can do a quick review. We know that when we're dividing and we have our division bar, inside that division bar is going to be our dividend. And you can see that right here. On the outside will be our divisor right here. And then our quotient will be up top right here. And again, just like long division, if you do have a remainder at the end, you have to put it over your divisor, all right? So nothing there is changing. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the next page. There's a couple things you have to remember when you do synthetic division. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at that? So here's the next page, and these are the two rules you need to follow when performing synthetic division. So rule number one, in order to perform synthetic division, the divisor must be a linear binomial, okay? So what that means, if your divisor is, I don't know, x squared plus 2, you cannot do synthetic division because that is not linear. That is a quadratic. All right. So again, your divisor must be a linear and a binomial, meaning two terms. So that's kind of the drawbacks of synthetic division. You can't use it all the time. If you had a problem like this here where your divisor was x squared plus 2, you would have to do long division. Okay. Now the next part says if the coefficient on your divisor, the linear binomial, is anything other than 1, you must divide it out at the end. Don't divide the remainder. So to give you an example, you could have a divisor that is x plus 1, okay? That would be a linear binomial and the coefficient in front of the variable is 1. In this case here, if I did synthetic division using this divisor, I do not need to divide anything out at the end. However, if I had, let's say, 2x plus 1, well, look at my coefficient now. It's no longer 1, it's 2. So at the very end, I would have to divide everything out by 2. And again, just make sure you do not divide the remainder, okay? You're not doing anything with the remainder. All right, let's take a look at our first example. So here's our first example. And just like with polynomial long division, you want to see if you are skipping any powers. I can see here on my dividend that I have x to the third power. Then I have x to the second power. This is technically x to the first power. And this constant here is technically 14x to the 0 power. But we don't have to write that. So I'm going in order. I'm doing 3, 2, 1, 0. I don't have to add any zeros when doing synthetic division. So how is it going to look? Well, you're going to do a long division bar and you're going to flip it upside down. So for example, it's going to look like this. Okay? Then you look at your divisor. It's x minus 5. In order to do synthetic division, you have to solve your divisor. How do you solve it? You set it equal to 0 and solve. Super easy. So if it's x minus 5 equal to 0, when I solve it, I get x is equal to 5. Okay? So from here, I'm simply just going to list out all of my coefficients. I do not need to include the variables here, unlike with long division where you have to include the variables. So right here, I have a coefficient of 1, negative 32, and 14. Those coefficients are going to be written right here in order. So 1, 1, negative 32, and then 14. Then your solved divisor right here goes on the outside. Okay? And then we're ready to go. So the first coefficient, being this one right here, we bring down and then we multiply. So for example, I bring it down, I get 1, and then I multiply. 5 times 1 is 5. I then put that value right here. And then I add. 1 plus 5 is 6. And then I multiply. 5 times 6 is 30. Okay, put that right here. Then I add. Negative 32 plus 30, I get negative 2. And then lastly, I multiply. 5 times a negative 2, I get negative 10. And then add 14 plus a negative 10, you get positive 4. Now the last number that I get here, I always box it in because that is going to be your remainder. So you always bring it down 1 degree when you divide. So if I look at the original dividend, it is a cubic. I can see that right here. since I divided it one time, it is now going to be a quadratic. So what I do from here, these numbers right here that we obtained, I just go ahead and put down what they are. So for example, this 1 is really now x squared. This 6 is now really our x. And this -2 is now going to be our constant. So writing it all together, this is our final answer right here, these values, okay? We just have to include the variables attached to them. So for example, we're going to have x squared plus 6x minus 2, and then our remainder, which is a positive 4, so plus 4 all over our divisor, which was x minus 5. Okay? And there it is. That's done. Okay, so that is polynomial synthetic division. Pretty easy. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at a couple more problems. But again, this one here is done. That's how you would write it, and that's it. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. So here's our next problem. First step, is your dividend missing any powers? In this one, I am missing a power. I go from x to the third power right to x to the first power, and then my constant right here, which is really x to the 0 power. I'm missing that x squared, okay? So I have to include a 0 for that. So let me do my synthetic division bar. I'm going to list out my coefficients. There's really a 1 here, right? So I'm going to do 1, and then I'm missing that x squared value, okay? So I have to put a 0. 0, and then I go to this one right here, this -69x, I put -69, and then I put 44, plus 44, okay? Now I have to solve my divisor. I get x is equal to 8 when I do that, right? We can do that in our head. So the 8 will go out here, and then we just go for it. So I bring down the 1, and then I multiply. 8 times 1, I get 8. I add, here I get 8. I multiply, I get 64. When I add here, I get -5. And then when I multiply, I get -40. Adding, I get another remainder of 4 here. Okay, box that in. And now again, I divided it one time. It's going to go down a degree. So it's no longer a cubic. It's going to be a quadratic, x squared, x constant. And again, technically my remainder is right here. Okay, you can write that down if you want. So writing it all together, I have x squared plus 8x minus 5, and then my remainder is positive, so plus 4 all over my divisor, which is x minus 8. X minus 8, done. Okay, that one's done. All right, why don't we go ahead and take a look at one more example. So here's my last example. Again, check your dividend. Are you skipping any powers? And in this problem, I am. I'm going from x to the third power, x to the second power, and then right into my constant. I'm missing that x to the first power, so I need to include a 0 there. So doing my synthetic division bar, I'm going to list out my coefficients, which are 5, 7, and then I'm missing that x to the first power, so I have to put a 0 here, and then -9. Okay? And now this right here, we have to solve. So if you do 5x plus 7 equal to 0, and you solve that, we'll have to move the 7 over and then divide by 5. I get x is equal to -7 all over 5. Okay? And so we're going to put that on the outside here, which is going to be -7 all over 5. Now, take note here. Notice your coefficient on your divisor. It is not 1. So at the very end, we're going to have to divide everything by 5. If we don't do that, we're actually going to get the answer wrong, okay? So you may want to circle it like I did here. That way you remember I have to divide everything by 5 except for the remainder, right? So I'm going to bring down the 5, bring down my 5, and then we multiply. Now the 5s will cancel here when we multiply. I'm going to be left with -7. Put that right here, and then we add. I get 0. Then we multiply, 0, add, 0. This one's easy, right? Multiply, we get another 0, and our remainder is going to be -9 when we add that up. Okay, so again, it was a cubic, now it is a quadratic, so x squared, x, constant, remainder, and remember, you have to divide these values all by 5 now. So if we divide these all by 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1, so I'm just going to put 1 here. And then 0 divided by 5 is 0. 0 divided by another 5, we get 0 again. So all that I really have to write here is 1x squared, or just x squared. So I'm going to write x squared, and again, these are 0. I don't have to do anything there, okay? So just x squared, and then your remainder, which again, you do not divide out. I put negative, and then 9 all over my divisor, which was 5x plus 7. And that's done. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and box that in. And that's pretty much it. So that is how you do polynomial synthetic division. It's much easier than polynomial long division. But remember, you can't always use synthetic division. If your divisor is not a linear binomial, you cannot do synthetic division. You have to revert back to polynomial long division. Also, remember, if your coefficient on your divisor is not 1, you have to divide it out at the end. If you're doing synthetic division, just don't divide out the remainder. And that's pretty much it. So if you found the video helpful, if you gained anything from the video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get more math videos in the future, and I'll see you in the next one.